Hey, folks. This is Jesse Cope back with another episode of the American Soul podcast. Hope y'all are doing well wherever y'all are and whatever part of the day you're in. Sure do appreciate y'all joining me as always, giving me a little bit of your time. Hope it makes that part of your day go smoother. For those of y'all that continue to share the podcast with others, tell people about it, help it grow. Um, Incredibly grateful and humbled by that. I'll talk again about it at the end of the podcast today, but if you didn't hear the update this last weekend, or if you did, just a little reminder, we're going to go to the different Patreon levels starting tomorrow. So if you want to hear tomorrow and Friday, if you could go to Patreon and sign up for that, I'd be grateful. And if you are interested in the video cast on Saturday, you can sign up there for that too. And then if you're interested in sending me questions or comments directly to me on email, you can sign up for that there too. So look forward to it. Hope you all enjoy it as well. And as I said, I'll mention it briefly again at the end today. You can't tell, it was a little windy here. For a moment, it sounded, at least as I walked down the road, like listening toward the ocean crashing back and forth. The wind is so strong up in the trees. But that might just be me. Not a whole lot to report. I have one puppy dog so far on the walk. Nobody else. Youngest daughter and I made some pumpkin pies recently, although the temperature has gone back up again, sadly, not shockingly for this part of the world. I do think fall is going to finally stay pretty soon. So we're excited about that. And we'll get going. We're going to talk today about capital punishment. I don't think I've really talked about that on the podcast before. And we're just going to look at a couple of comments by some of our leaders throughout the history of the country and talk about that a little bit, because that can be a pretty hot topic at times today. Some of this is pulled from, there's a lot of different sources, a little bit from the Founders Bible, which is along with the Patriots Bible and America's God and Country Encyclopedia. I highly recommend. It's a great resource. I would have a copy in each home for sure, and definitely it should be required textbook in every single classroom across the country. So the first couple quotes are from the Bible, because this is a Christian nation. We talk about that repeatedly. Most recent, at the top of my head right now, is James Kent's commentary that we went through, who was the Supreme Court, Chief Justice of the New York Supreme Court, considered one of the premier legal minds. And his comment was, "We are a Christian people, and the morality of the country is deeply engrafted upon Christianity, and not upon the doctrines or worship of those impostors of the religions." So, since we are a Christian nation, it would behoove us to turn back to the Bible and God's comments there about topics. It certainly would help if we did that exponentially more as far as men and women in marriage are concerned. Genesis chapter 9, 5 through 6 From the hand of every man's brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. You know, I'm not a scholar, theologian, folks, so a lot of this I have to take at face value. But when, in the Ten Commandments, when God's talking about thou shalt not kill, right, which is often used as a condemnation or an excuse, either condemnation of Christians who support capital punishment or a excuse of Christians that don't. That command out of the Ten Commands means murder, meaning that you have taken an innocent life. Capital punishment isn't taking an innocent life. Capital punishment is requiring, as Genesis says here, the life of someone who has committed a heinous crime. Treason is on that list. Uh, Murder in the cruelest sense. You talk about serial killers, serial rapists who, while not taking lives, do take that life emotionally, right? Uh, and so there's definitely, and this is from the Old Testament, right? But there's definitely a precedent for capital punishment, a command from God actually to require the blood of that innocent life all the way back to Cain and Abel from the man who killed, murdered, right, that person. Romans 13:3-4 from the New Testament. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid. For it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Our government is supposed to be a threat to those who do evil and a help to those who do good. That is certainly not the case in America today, by any stretch of the imagination. I have one other puppy dog that decided to come out, I think just because he wants to be petted, scratched, but nonetheless. But when a government is functioning that way, that's the Mayhew sermon from the 1750s that we talk about every few months or so. We have a responsibility as Christians to follow a government that's following God. We have no responsibility as Christians to follow a government that's going against God. And here, when you're talking about capital punishment, there's a reason to fear a government that's following God. Because they don't bear, as it says, the sword, justice, the ability to condemn and even execute for no reason. They do so because they're supposed to be ministers for God in those leadership positions. But when they're not, as our founding fathers illustrated and talked about, and we talk about quite often, then there's other courses of action that are required. Deuteronomy 17:6. On the evidence of two witnesses or three witnesses, he who is to die shall be put to death. He shall not be put to death on evidence of one witness. So again, going back to the Bible and the comments there, you've got to have multiple witnesses in order to condemn someone of capital punishment. And somewhere here, I've got it, but I don't know what I did with it. Because that's straight from our Constitution, folks, and I can't find the reference. I must not have. Ha! Well, I apologize. I'll have to go back and find it. But that is from, I can't remember what part of our Constitution, but that requirement for multiple witness is there, and it specifically comes from, it's backed up by the Bible. So, which is another great example of how when people say, well, God's not in the Constitution, maybe not explicitly, folks, but implicitly in multiple places, right? And again, just this is a line straight out of a quote by the editors of the Founders Bible. Murder means shedding innocent blood, and in the scriptures, God repeatedly denounces the shedding of innocent blood, but capital punishment is the shedding of guilty blood. I thought that was a pretty good way to say it. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Henry Brockholst Livingston, who was a military officer during the American Revolution, talking about treason, the requirement for capital punishment for treason. Treason not only holds a conspicuous and generally the first place in every catalog of crimes, but is almost universally punished with death. Government is so high a blessing, and its preservation and support are so essential to the welfare of every member of the body politic, that to attempt its subversion has ever been regarded a most aggravated offense. So you've got murder, you've got treason. Noah Webster, who we've talked about often on the podcast. Treason is the highest crime of a civil nature of which a man can be guilty. And so you think about this, and we see this. It's interesting. When I was doing the research for the podcast, this comparison came to mind, right? Why is treason looked upon so badly? Because treason isn't just murder of one man. Treason is most often, when it's successful in its result, it's the murder of many, many, many men, people, uh, depending on how bad the treason is, it can be hundreds, thousands, right? And so it's mass murder, if you will, which we have seen quite a bit of today, over the last 30 years. And so you would add murder of one man, treason, mass murder, right? All of those would be cases where you see from these couple quotes, you go back to the Bible, verses out of Genesis and Deuteronomy, that capital punishment is required. Seeing how much time. So we've got a couple here. I don't know how far we're going to get. We'll see. This is Thomas Jefferson, a letter from Thomas Jefferson to Edmund Pendleton, 26 August 1776. So right smack dab at the beginning of the Revolution, of the war at least. Punishments I know are necessary, and I would provide them, strict and inflexible, but proportioned to the crime. Death might be inflicted for murder, and perhaps for treason, if you would take out of the description of treason all crimes which are not such in their nature. So Jefferson lending support to capital punishment, as long as it truly is for those reasons: murder, right, treason. And then this is a pretty good quote too, because it's something that I don't know how well we handle today. In fact, I don't think we handle it very well for a couple of reasons. But he says rape, buggery, etc., punished by castration. All other crimes by working on high roads, rivers, galleys, etc., a certain time proportioned to the offense. So the last line I thought was interesting because he's obviously saying, for lesser offenses, put them in prison and have them work on projects for the country, state, country. And then the line in between about rape, you know, pretty good chance that if castration, chemical, physical, however you want to put it, was a given for rape conviction, and really this is true of all of them, folks, and this is something you see uh, across the board, really. You can go back to the riots for Black Lives Matter and Antifa. You can go to public education today. You can go to the corruption of our politicians, and there's probably others, but I can go through these three pretty quickly. So the mob, right, destroyed towns and courthouses, burned, literally raped, pillaged, and plundered for most of a year. And the vast majority of those people were never punished because we don't hold people accountable anymore. Our politicians, I can't not, every chance I get when I think about it, which is not infrequently, go back to our past president and secretary of state who abandoned 4 Americans to die at the hands of Muslims, Benghazi, and then afterwards lied about it. And and then afterwards had the gall to pretend it didn't matter. What difference did it matter anyway? That has always struck me as pretty close to, well, actually, as treason when you have people, the Secretary of State and the President, who knowingly abandon these people to die without sending aid when aid could have been sent. And then education today, we absolutely don't hold accountable. Even in what, this is, we're talking about capital punishment here, obviously a much lesser thing, but this is where we start to teach our children these lessons as a nation. And the lesson we're teaching today is, do whatever you want. We're going to give you a million other chances. In fact, we're going to give you infinite chances. You're never going to have to really be held responsible. You make a bad test grade, we're going to retest you. In fact, we may even force to retest you. You're going to, uh, you don't want to pay attention to class. That's okay. You can do it over. Take in the summer again, do it next year. Doesn't matter. We'll give you extra time. We'll give you less hard questions. We'll give you et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again and again and again, we don't hold them accountable. You have some kind of emotional disturbance. Well, that's okay. Then you can throw desks across the classroom. You can even get into fights with law enforcement, and it's okay. We'll put you right back in the classroom with other students. You don't want to pass in general, that's okay. You could stay in there. We're just going to keep moving you on. And so, and if you don't believe me here on the podcast, talk to somebody that you trust. Go find some educator, counselor, administrator that you think is a decent person and ask them. And if they really are and they have any clue what's going on, they're going to absolutely back that up all the way. And this isn't coming from, it can come from your local schools. And some of it does. You see those cases across the country. We see more and more of them, sadly, especially in your larger districts. But a lot of times, folks, the hands of the administrators and counselors and even the school board are tied because these requirements are coming from the state and federal level. And so we're teaching our kids, even though, yeah, it's not capital punishment, folks. I'm not even beginning to say that. That's so, because some of y'all are going to make that comment. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out there so I can ignore those comments. But the point is, we're teaching our children, we're raising them systemically, institutionally, with the idea that there is no permanent repercussion. If you go out and get in a car wreck as an adult right now, yeah, you can fix the car and your insurance will pay for it, right? But you still got to suffer whatever the consequences are. If you're drunk, you're going to have to deal with the consequences with law enforcement because there are still a few consequences out there. If you killed somebody else in a car wreck because you were being negligent, you're still going to have to deal with it. Even maybe the better example is even when you weren't being negligent. What if somebody else was being negligent and you accidentally killed that person in a car wreck? There's no redo. There's no start over button. It's not a video game. You don't get to go back and redo it. There's consequences. But we're not teaching our children that. We're teaching them that they have an infinite number of chances and there are no consequences, which is just a little side note here why you continue to see the rate of the private schools, well, I should say the rate of homeschooling for sure to increase year after year. Let's see how much time we got left. Oh, Lord, we don't have any time left. I'll tell you what, I've got a couple by Reagan and one by Teddy Roosevelt, and we'll come back to those maybe tomorrow. Maybe we'll try and finish those up. Just a little quick reminder again, folks, for those of y'all, if you're enjoying the podcast, you want to keep listening to it, y'all can go to the Patreon page, which I'll put the link again down in the bottom of this podcast in the description. And you can sign up for any one of those three levels. If you just want the next couple podcasts for Thursday, Friday, that's the first level. If you want the video cast on Saturday, that's the second level. And then if you want to be able to email me directly with questions or comments, and I'll try and talk about some of those in podcasts as they come through, that's the third level. And anybody you want to share that with, I'd be incredibly grateful for. I'm sorry I went over today. We will try and finish up capital punishment at some point in the next few episodes when we have some time. Y'all have a great rest of whatever is left of your day. Hopefully the wind wasn't too bad today. God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless America. Y'all remember, I haven't talked about this in a long time, popped in my head, Patrick Henry, sphere of influence. Wherever you are, folks, you've got some influence. And if we're going to turn this thing back around to God, you've got to use that wherever you are, whatever your sphere is. We'll talk to y'all soon. Looking forward to it.